Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Who's Your Neighbor program. My name is Jenny Belusic, and I am the Diversity Specialist for the City of Tempe. I'm so glad you're all here with us today. We have with us a wonderful program with Theresa James, who is the City of Tempe Housing Services Supervisor. And we also have with us Ken Lynch, who is Tumbleweed's Tempe Youth Resource Center Communications Officer, right?
Yeah,
Got it.
right.
Okay, wonderful. So we do this program because, as you know, you all know your lifestyle and your culture, but do you know your neighbors? And our topic today is youth homelessness. So I hope you enjoy the program. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our city manager, Andrew Ching, for being here. Thank you, Andrew. And I'd also like to introduce Rosa Inchausti, who is the director of the Office of Strategic Management and Diversity. Rosa's back there. We also have Assistant Police Chief John Rush. And we have with us Judge Mary Ann Majestic. And there she is. And Naomi Farrell, who is our Human Services Director. So thank you all for being here. With that, I am going to turn it over to Theresa. Oh, and one last thing before I turn it over to Theresa. Back by the desserts, we do have surveys. If you wouldn't mind filling out a survey, that would be greatly appreciated. And I just saw Brenda Buren. I'm sorry, Brenda, Assistant Chief Brenda Buren is here also. Oh, and they're pointing at one more person. Who am I missing? Oh, Lauren. Hi, Lauren. And Councilmember Lauren Kuby. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Can everybody hear me? I'm not comfortable with a mic, so sometimes I don't talk loud enough into it. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to be here this afternoon. I've been working with the city for the last 13 years as the homeless coordinator, and I want to start out by telling you that I'm really proud to work for the city of Tempe. We are a city that does care about this issue deeply. We are always looking at ways that we can do a better job of addressing homelessness, and we are an active participant in the regional effort to end homelessness. And that's critical because what we're learning about homeless individuals and families is they don't stay in one place. Some of them move from city to city. And the reality is that no city has all of the resources to address this issue. So it's imperative that cities work together, and that's something that I've been actively involved in for the last 13 years. Ending homelessness is not an unrealistic goal. And as I look at you after I've said that, I see some of you are kind of surprised by that term, ending homelessness. Yes, we will always have individuals and families who become homeless, but the reality is, as a society, we can do a much better job of assisting those folks faster than we have been for the last 20 or 25 years. And that is where we need to be, and that's where we focus on, is how can we help people as quickly as possible so that they don't languish on the streets for years. According to the Arizona Department of Economic Security, on a single night in Arizona, there are 2,957 people who are homeless. Most of those people are here in Maricopa County and Pima County, but we live in a state with lots of rural areas, and I want you to think about those folks as well. They don't have access to services. They may be in places where they don't have a support system. Every year, HUD, which is one of the biggest funding sources for homeless services, asks that cities do what we call an annual street count. We do it the last Tuesday of every January. It happens across the country on that day. And on that same night, people who are staying in shelters or transitional living programs are also counted. When we did the count in January, we counted 89 people that morning. I'm going to be honest and tell you there is no way to accurately count people who are living on the street. And when I share that number with other service providers, with the police department, with people who come in contact with homelessness on a regular basis, we all think there are probably more like 300 to 500 homeless people on any given day in Tempe. And it's important when you think about homelessness to go beyond that stereotype that some of us have in our heads. When I talked about that with other groups, people tell me that when they think of homelessness, they think of somebody standing at the freeway ramp with a sign or on Mill Avenue, etc. And one of the things that I want you to take from today's presentation is that people and families become homeless for a wide variety of reasons. It's not because simply that they're alcoholics or that they make bad choices or they do dumb things. There's lots of valid reasons. And the reality is that it could happen to any one of us. And I know a lot of times that makes people uncomfortable to think about it, but I think it's important to look at it from that perspective as well. I want to share with you some of those reasons so that you have that information. Domestic violence is a reason that people become homeless. When families have violence going on, whichever partner is the victim of that and their children, they're not safe. That is not safe. And so they're considered part of the homeless population. We also see veterans. About 10% of the people who are homeless throughout the country are veterans. And we're talking about people all the way from the Vietnam era up to people who are coming back today from Afghanistan and Iraq. And they're coming back and they've lost their job, and as a result, they lose their homes. We're also seeing people who live with serious mental illness. And the unfortunate reality in our society is that we don't have a behavioral health system in any state across the country that can keep up with the demand for those services. And the reality is that for people who are living with serious mental illness, they don't necessarily succeed if they go to the homeless shelters that exist or to the transitional living programs. And so many of them end up being on the streets for many, many years. And the longer that goes on, the more difficult it is for them to get off the street. We also see people who are living with addiction, and it's very difficult for them. Up until about the last 5 years, people have been told if you're going to get into a shelter, either as a single person or as part of a family, you must stop drinking. You must abstain from all use. And as a result, lots of people end up being asked to leave shelters. A lot of people end up not even trying to get into services. And thankfully now the industry, the homeless service industry, is starting to look at this from a harm reduction mode where we work to help people end their addiction over time in a way that's going to work for them. So addiction is a major issue. We also see families with children. Now, we don't see them on the street as much because families tend to be able to find friends or other families that they can live doubled and tripled up with. But that ends up being a precarious situation. Think about it. If you had to go live with your cousin and their family, you're probably only going to feel comfortable doing that for so long before you feel like you wear out your welcome. We're also seeing an increase in elderly people who are on the street, and that's heartbreaking. So we need to be looking at what services can we provide for them? How can we outreach to that group of people? And the group that is the topic of our conversation today is homeless youth. And so with that, I want to make sure you know that Tumbleweed, which is one of the premier agencies in Maricopa County that serves homeless youth, they have a resource center here in Tempe. They serve youth who walk in, who are on the streets, and at that center, they're able to provide them with basic needs. And as they get to know them, they also reach out to them to provide case management. Tumbleweed also does outreach on our streets, reaching out to the young population. So I want to introduce Ken Lynch. He is the Chief Communications Officer at Tumbleweed, and he's going to give you more information about homeless youth.
Thank you, Theresa. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for inviting Tumbleweed. I really appreciate you all being here. City Manager Ching and Councilwoman Kuby, thank you very much for being here as well. When I was a communications director in municipal government in the Valley, when you had this many people in the council chambers, it was usually bad news. But I'm really glad that there's such a turnout for this topic here today. A few years ago, I heard Robert Reich speak in Phoenix, and he said something I've never forgotten. And when you look around the room today, keep this in mind as you look at your colleagues and work with each other every day. He said, there's one thing we all have in common as Americans, and it's poverty. He said, you don't have to go back far in anybody's family to find that we all came from practically nothing. And I really liked that sentiment, and I've never forgotten it. Homelessness is part of that. And if you ever had, say, a story in the family about an uncle who hopped trains to get to the West Coast for a job or something like that, well, you've got homelessness in your family too. Homelessness tends to be transient, homelessness tends to be temporary, and homelessness tends to be a lot more widespread than we think it is. So with that, I want to talk to you about, though, the specific group today, and that is youth homelessness. I represent Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed equals homeless youth. These are 3 of our young people, a picture taken just a few weeks ago. Homeless youth, I want you to remember this too, are different from homeless adults. How are they different? Well, they're young. They are usually not dealing with decades of mental illness and homelessness. The adult homeless population is very difficult to reach and very hard to treat. Young people aren't in that same situation. They have the energy, the optimism, the resilience, and the hope of youth. Again, these pictures are our young people. These are young homeless people. This is what they look like. This is who they are. They're just like any other young people you will meet, except they've been dealt a really bad hand. Switching gears to talk about Tumbleweed briefly, we are a nonprofit aiding homeless and runaway youth ages 12 to 25. We've been doing it since 1975. This is our first venue on 301 West Portland in Phoenix. That building still stands. And that's always been our mission statement, helping homeless and vulnerable youth grow and thrive in Maricopa County. We operate in Phoenix and in Tempe. We have a total of 12 facilities. Theresa mentioned the Youth Resource Center. Victor Rojas is here today. He manages our Youth Resource Center on West University in Tempe. Officer Ryan Conway is also here today. Ryan, if you'd raise your hand. He's been a great help as a liaison with the community and with the city of Tempe, and we really appreciate his efforts here. So people ask us, Theresa mentioned about 2,500 people a night being homeless in the county. So people ask what the extent of the issue is with youth homelessness in the county. We estimate, based on an extrapolation of those numbers, that there's between 600 and 800 young people in this age group every night who have no place to stay. People often ask, well, how do people in this age group become homeless in the first place? Well, naturally, all of them have a story. Everyone is unique and has a unique background. But if there's one term that sort of encompasses most of it, it's abuse. Many of them are fleeing abusive situations. Our last survey last summer with the ASU School of Social Research, these were the typical kinds of abuse these young people are fleeing. Domestic violence, either perpetrated against themselves or that they witnessed in the home, which can be just as traumatic for a young person. There's a great deal of sexual abuse and incest among the homeless youth population. Emotional abuse and neglect. We have kids in our housing programs who don't know how to take a shower. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think about it, our families, our parents taught us, wash behind your neck, wash behind your ears. If nobody taught you how to do that, you might not do it. And we do have kids who don't know how to take a shower. That's the level of neglect that we see. There is a great deal of substance abuse, and there's mental and physical illness related to all of these things that our kids manifest or that they see in their home environment that they are fleeing. Families disintegrate. If you're living in an apartment and you lose your job, it doesn't take too long before you can't pay your rent. And then you're living in a car, and it's really tough to keep families together when you're living in a car. So we see a lot of, say, 15-year-olds whose family says, your best bet is to try to get to your uncle in Colorado, which is that way. And they never get to Colorado, and they wind up being homeless. 35% of our young people aged out of the foster care system. That means they turned 18, they had to leave their foster environment, they have no survival skills, they have no life skills, they have no support system, they go directly into homelessness What does that tell you about the state of the foster care system in Arizona? I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions about that. But that's the fact. 35% surveyed came out of the youth of the foster care system. 38% of our youth homeless population identify as LGBTQ. That's significantly higher than the general population. Most of them have been evicted from their families due to their sexual orientation. Some of the saddest stories you'll hear talking to homeless kids are in the LGBTQ community. Sex trafficking and sex is a big deal on the street among homeless youth. 35.6% of our kids say they've been sexually coerced, sex trafficked since they've been on the street. This is men as well as women. Average age of first sexual coercion, 15. There's a lot of survival sex out there for these kids. Sex for a place to stay, sex for something to eat, sex just to get by. And of course, they're easy prey for sex traffickers. 40% of these young people, according to our survey, say they have attempted to kill themselves. So obviously we're dealing with a very traumatized population. But this is sometimes before they became homeless. So if you're a traumatized youth, you're trying to get away from this abusive situation, the next question is, well, how do they wind up being actually homeless? The answer is, for one thing, they put little or no foresight into it. They'll just grab a backpack and they'll go just to get out. And they think, oh, I'm going to stay at my friend's house for a couple of days, and then I'll figure things out. Well, you can't stay for very long sleeping on somebody's floor. Before they know it, they're in the park. And the first night is kind of interesting. The second and third night, they start to think, you know, this might last a while. It happens quickly. And then they become re-traumatized by the experience of being homeless. And by that I mean their mental health deteriorates. That's one of the first things we see is their mental health deteriorates. Why? Well, they can't get clean. You know, if you haven't brushed your teeth in 5 days, or if you're wearing the same clothes you were wearing a week ago, that has an effect mentally on how you feel and how you see yourself. They have new anxieties about their safety, and understandably so, and about their food. We do see a phenomenon called food hoarding. If you lay out food for these kids, they'll start stuffing it in their pockets, stuffing it in their jackets, and put it in their backpacks. Food anxiety. They're isolated. You know, if they thought they didn't have any support or friends in their bad home environment, they sure don't have anybody on the street. And kind of underappreciated is how fatigued they are. They're tired. They can't rest well enough mentally. They can't relax well enough to sleep well. And obviously they have no home. One of the first things they want to do when they come into our resource centers is to sleep. They're tired. So it's a very re-traumatizing experience for them. People ask how we find them. As Theresa mentioned, we do street outreach. We're out there 5 nights a week. We know where to look by now. Mill Avenue is one of those places. Under bridges, along the river bottom, city parks. That's where the kids go. They avoid the adult homeless population because that's usually trouble for them. That's who preys upon them. That's who can victimize them. They don't like to be in or around the adult population, and they don't like to be identified with the adult homeless population. We also run the Safe Place program with Valley Light Rail and QT stores. At every light rail station, you've probably seen these red buttons with the yellow box. And this is an emergency call system for kids 17 and younger who are in crisis, who are on the street, who need help right now. If they press that red button at a Valley Metro rail station, they're put immediately in touch with Valley Metro Dispatch, who will tell them, stay where you are. We can see you with our cameras. You're monitored. You're okay. They call us. We'll have them off the street and in a shelter within 45 minutes. Last year, we got 130 kids off the street that way. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot in a valley of 4.5 million people, but there's what, 60 people here now? That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of young lives that are being helped through this system. We're very grateful for Quick Trip stores and to Valley Metro for helping that. Valley Metro is looking at expanding that to all of their buses valley-wide. That's 990 buses. That would be outstanding. We're working on that with them. We also have the Mobile Youth Resource Center. We now have agreements with the cities of Surprise, Guadalupe, Mesa, and Chandler to roll this thing out 1 day a week in each of those cities. On board are showers, laundry facilities, bathrooms. In the van is backpacks full of food. Our counseling services are available to them. Obviously, somebody's got to drive that van. So we're starting to go where they are, because what we found out is these kids are homeless, yes, but they do have what they consider kind of a home area. And if they're in Mesa and services are in Central Phoenix, sometimes they'll just never make the trip, or they'll feel very uncomfortable being out of their element. So we're trying recently to get those services to them where they are. So that's how we find kids. Now, what can we do for them? Well, we do have an emergency housing facility on East Van Buren. It's an old hotel next to the UMOM facility. It's only 33 beds, nowhere near enough, but it's a lot better than nothing. As you can see from this picture, it's a pretty humble place. When this picture was taken about a year ago, we didn't even have dressers for these kids. Everything she has is on the floor. By the way, she's dressed that way because she'd been stabilized by this point. She'd been off the street for a couple of weeks, and we got her some clothes, and she's looking for work. And she got a job. She found a job working for a cleaning company that cleans stadiums around the valley. You can't see her face very well, but that's one traumatized kid. I think we have another picture of her a little later. We have pet-friendly rooms there. We've all seen homeless people with pets, almost always a dog. Homeless youth sometimes take their family pet, quote unquote, with them, or they acquire a dog on the street. This bond is ferociously close. We've discovered that if we don't have animal food when we do outreach, if we don't have pet-friendly rooms in our emergency housing facilities, the kids will stay on the street. It's a deal breaker. So we're very responsive to how powerful that bond is between a homeless young person and a pet. It's very, very strong indeed. The basic needs that can be met at Phoenix and Tempe Youth Resource Center, after we build a little bit of a relationship with them through street outreach, we can encourage them to come in. These are not 24/7 centers. They're open from mid-morning to mid-afternoon, Monday through Friday. All the pictures you'll see, by the way, these are our young people. This picture was taken in our Phoenix Youth Resource Center. There they can find basic needs: food, showers, clothing, safety. They can get off the street for a little while. And they find each other. This is one of my favorite pictures. This picture was taken at our Tempe Youth Resource Center. These two young ladies had just met and agreed to do a cute little huggy for the camera. And they're still around. I saw the girl on the right about 2 months ago. She's doing a lot better. We got her reconnected with her mom, and she's living with mom again. We also operate a learning center in our offices in Phoenix. This is a county-accredited alternative high school. Kids can get their high school diplomas through Tumbleweed, and we graduate about 40 kids a year through that program. Up to the age 25, this is kind of technical speak: transitional housing, life skills, job development, education, high school equivalency. Here's what this means. These are the kind of things most people rely on their families for. This means we'll help you with your apartment if you stay in school, if you have a job, if you keep the place clean, if you do your laundry, if you budget your money. The sort of life skills that all of us had some guidance with. These kids don't have guidance. Remember, the idea is to transition them into independent young adulthood. This transitional housing is a huge and important step in that direction. This is a real make or break period for them when we get them into transitional housing. We do have kids who are totally independent. We're still helping them with some subsidization of services at apartment complexes around the valley. Just this fiscal year, we got funding from Scottsdale and from Chandler. First time for each of those cities. Surprise, too. So we're grateful that the cities around the valley are recognizing that they do have homeless youth and services are available for them. All they have to do is reach out. We do have a lot of young moms. I don't know how many young little babies like this we have right now. I know we have 3 at our Earl facility, our Earl Road facility in Phoenix, but we do see a lot of little kids. This year, we're starting sex trafficking survivors. We have a grant from the Victims of Crime Act, the Offices of the Victims of Crime in the Department of Justice, to start a program that's just counseling for sex traffic survivors, housing designated for them, public education. This picture was taken at the White House last January. The woman in red there speaking, that's Melissa. She is our sex trafficking coordinator. It's a very widely recognized program, what we're doing here. She was invited to the White House to speak last January. We also do a thing called family finding. This is a great picture. It was taken just last Saturday. In the center is our Chief Executive Officer, Cindy Schuler. On the left and the right are two young men. The man on the left, I think that's, yeah, your left, his name is Kiefer. Kiefer came to us as a heroin-addicted, alley-living, homeless, friendless young person, involved in gang life, literally sleeping in alleys. Through family finding, which is all about connecting young people with maybe relatives they'd lost track of, adults who might support them and be helpful to them as they grow up. Because remember, when you were 21 and you had your own apartment, or 22 or 23, you know, when you closed the door at night, you still had a support system. If you had a bad day at work, you could call a parent or a step-parent or an uncle or a grandmother. These kids don't have that. So we try to find those connections that they may have forgotten about and help them rebuild those. Kiefer reconnected with his Native American roots. And last November, there was a reinitiation ceremony for him at the San Carlos Reservation. And he was reintroduced to the tribe, and he's very close to his grandmother now in San Carlos. And he's a great, great story. He's in college, he's in Phoenix College now, and he's working through a program with the Bureau of Land Management. He's very interested in environmental management. On the right, that is Sean McKenzie. Keep an eye on Sean. He announced at the gala dinner that he was a speaker at last Saturday night that he intends to be a Supreme Court justice. I wouldn't put it past him. Remember that name. So family finding is really critical for us. We also do social enterprise. We have a t-shirt production company where young kids who like this, who don't know how to show up on time, who don't know how to solve conflicts in the workplace, who don't know how important it is to be ready for work when the time comes. This is a great place for them to learn. And of course, what profits it generates do help support Tumbleweed. That's the whole concept of social enterprise. But the heart of Tumbleweed is counseling. It's recovering from trauma, building a life plan to independent adulthood. This is that same young woman you saw on the bed. This is her outside of her room. She's one of our transgender youth. And she's come a long way since she's been on the street. I'll close with just a couple of quotes from our young people. My life has had a dramatic change. I'm now getting into nursing school and working on my independent living skills. I love this line. I truly believe I'm on my way to being a fully functional adult. That's a pretty modest dream to have. But that's the dream. First things first, one step at a time. I appreciate the chance to get away from the dangers of the street. I've learned to budget. That's very important. And he recognizes that. I've learned to budget and live on my own. This next sentence, too, I thought was really important. I don't know what would have happened to me. So imagine the mental state you'd have to be in for those words to come out of your mouth. I don't know what would have happened to me. I spent months on strangers' couches and parks and bushes. Another one of these key sentences. It was hard to believe my life had gotten so horrible. I have a chance to finish school and work for a better future. Going to Tumbleweed was my best decision. This is Brianna. She agreed to pose with a thank you sign, and that's how we wrap up our presentation. I'll make this final comment, though. I understand that it's difficult to look at homeless people and differentiate them from each other. It's difficult to see a homeless youth sitting on Mill Avenue or under a bridge near the river bottom and see a young person in crisis, a youth who needs help. It's easy not to see it that way. So the elephant in the room, I got a call from the Business Journal yesterday about the council's action earlier this month. Here's what I said to them. I said, we value and sympathize and understand the importance of Mill Avenue and what the merchants and the elected officials of Tempe are doing to guarantee its continued success. It's nationally known. It's a source of pride to everyone in Arizona. It's an opportunity that this has come to the public's attention to remind all of us to look at these young people and understand what you're looking at. You're looking at young people in crisis who need a little help. And if you can see them that way, you can do something about it. You can work with us to help them transition to independent young adulthood. And I closed that interview with this comment. If we help them now, they don't become long-term unemployed. They don't become chronically homeless. They don't wind up in the prison system or on other forms of welfare that ultimately cost all of us a lot more money. They become those independent young adults. And that's what we strive for. And we're very happy to report that we have a lot of success with that. So with that, I'll close. I spoke a little longer than I thought I would, but we have plenty of time for comments and questions. I know a lot of you need to be back at your desks at 1 o'clock. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes. Who's got questions? I see one down here.
What do you need the most? What do you need the citizens of Tempe to help you with?
Darlene is asking what the citizens, what we can do, what do they need most to help Tumbleweed succeed?
Thanks for remembering to repeat the question. I think they can hear me okay through this. Tumbleweed has a lot of needs. I'll be blunt, money, because money's fungible. We can translate that into anything from boxes of diapers to food. So that's critical. It's also one of the simplest things people can do is write a check, go to our website, make a donation through the website, as much or as little as you'd like. That makes a big, big difference. We do have a donation center, and we ask people for supplies. We're always short of the real basics, things like bottles of water. Believe it or not, something as simple as water, if you're living on the street and you don't have $1 for a bottle of water, it's not that easy to find a glass of water. It really isn't. We can't have enough water bottles, and we can't have enough ready cash.
I would add to that too that they need clothing for young people, donations of food, and always volunteers. So I know that one of the ways that we use volunteers is when we do that street count every year. And Tumbleweed always makes sure that they do a special event to draw the youth into their center that day so that we get the best count that we can. Other questions? She's asking if you find that any of the youth are refugees.
Yes, we operate, among our 12 facilities, we have 3 residential facilities in which we house 30 young refugee kids. We don't find them on the street. We find them through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, through the Health and Human Services Department. These are young people who have been picked up by ICE at some point along their route, and they wind up with the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which does try to settle them. And we have 30 of those young people, some of them as young as 12, in our 3 residential facilities. So yes, we do see refugee kids, absolutely. That's correct. That's a great question, and it's one that's a little over my head. I can tell you that we spent quite a bit of time at the legislature this session talking with both the majority and the minority leaders about what can be done and what kind of ideas they have. Right now, their focus is on the emergent situation they have there, which is reducing the backlog of DCS cases in which abuse has been reported. So they kept kind of moving over to that topic, and understandably so. So we're still kind of wrestling with really what can be done. I'm not sure it's up to Tumbleweed to propose solutions. I think right now our job is to educate the legislature so that they see that, yes, a lot of these homeless kids are coming out of the foster care system, going directly into homeless, and they're going to wind up costing you again. Because if you don't help them or if you don't reform that system in some way, they are going to wind up, as I said, in prison, or they're going to wind up being long-term unemployed or long-term homeless, and that just costs the state even more money.
And I would like to add to that the Arizona Coalition to End Homelessness, I'm on that board of directors, and the focus of that coalition is to do advocacy, both at the city's level, the state, and the federal level. And we are always looking at ways that we can work closer with that system, Parish, so that there can be positive change around this. We are also at the continuum of care level, which is a planning body that looks at homelessness throughout the year and how we spend our dollars in Maricopa County. We are looking at ways to get people from that system onto our continuum of care so that we can have conversations that will lead to change. Yes, Rachel.
So I'm explaining why I'm asking this question because I know there's a lot of schools and it might be too much, to do just to do it. But as a substitute teacher at Tempe Union High School District a couple years ago, there was a young man who was a 4.0 student and lived with his grandmother, and she put him out once he turned 18. And just to add to one of the reasons, people don't know why kids become homeless, he had nowhere to go. And I wanted to know if you're willing to go into the high schools and let them know that there is a place that can help them if something like that was to happen, in addition to all the other, reasons that they end up in that situation.
Yes, we do. That's a great question, and it's an ongoing effort on the part of Tumbleweed. The Safe Place program is really geared towards teens 17 and younger. So we have an excellent Safe Place representative, a guy named Colton Washburn, who's out in the high schools practically every day, making presentations and doing tabling events at lunch hours. In addition to that, we do work with the McKinney-Vento people in the school districts, because those folks know, for those who don't know, McKinney-Vento is a federal program based on federal legislation to address homelessness among student populations. Those people know exactly who their homeless kids are. They've got them in every school district in the state, and they know who they are. And we interface with them quite a bit and help them as much as we can. But we're a relatively small organization. There's a lot of other people out there trying to do what we're doing too. But just so you'll know, we've got a full-time staff of about 160 and an annual budget of around $9 million. It's not small, but it's not big. There's only so much we can do.
We do have a homeless education liaison in the audience today. Did you want to say something?
That are out of their house, they get kicked out of their house and nowhere to go. And I know you guys have the transitional living. What's the best steps to get them into that, seeing a case manager? How do I do that? How do I sign that book up?
The best thing to do is to refer them to the youth resource centers in Tempe and Phoenix. If they can get there, then we do intake there. We'll talk to them, we'll get their story down, we'll start to get them in the process of looking for work, finding a place to live, setting up as young adults. And what matters, I think, a great deal to them is they've got a place to go where they can talk to somebody. They will get case managed from the Phoenix and Tempe Youth Resource Centers. They will have case management assigned to them. They will have an individual, one person, who can talk to them. And even if they wind up staying with us for months or years in these different programs, everything from emergency housing through transitional living, that case manager follows them through the process. So they've always got an advocate and a supporter within Tumbleweed.
I know we have questions back here, so Lauren.
Is there a limit of hours in a day that a young person can spend at the youth resource center?
The question was whether there's a limit to the hours of the day people can spend at the youth resource centers in Phoenix and Tempe. The answer is, the process is when they come in, they do need to be there for a specific reason. Maybe to be on the computer to look for work, to wash their clothes, to stock up on food. So they log in, they write down their purpose and the amount of time it's going to take them to do that. We do that for a couple of reasons: to get the most effective use of the facility that we have. And also, the last thing we want it to do is to turn into kind of like just a hangout place. We want to keep these kids focused. You're here for a reason, you're here for a specific purpose, and while you're here, let's talk to you about what tomorrow's going to be like or what the next day is going to be like, so that we start getting them, thinking a little bit more in a linear fashion and towards the future.
Would that be contributing to the increase of young people on Mill Avenue if they have no place to go?
That I couldn't answer. We do what we can. We're open 5 days a week from 10 to 5, or about 10 to 3 roughly. And when the doors close at 3 o'clock, yes, there is not a whole lot we can do except to say, see you tomorrow. I hate to say it, but that's just the fact. Yeah. Everything's a funding issue. Yes, sir. Sir.
As a citizen today, and I'm hearing you mentioned it yourself. Is there seeing all these different efforts? So you think that it's all good, it's all encouraging, but is there overlap?
Well, the question is if there's a kind of an overarching coordinating body that, if I understand the question correctly, that sort of makes sure that we're as efficient as possible as a larger community in providing these services to homeless youth. Theresa mentioned the coalition. That's a really good example of a group that's doing work like that. There is more and more of that type of coordination going on. We were very pleased last fall to receive a grant to do coordinated intake between Tumbleweed, 1 in 10, and Native American Connections. So that's 3 pretty significant agencies that are now talking to each other and working together so that if 1 in 10 takes in a youth, well, they're connected to the services at Tumbleweed and also to the services at Native American Connections. But Theresa, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, what I would add is that at the continuum of care level, we are looking at that regularly. And there is a group that's being headed up by Valley of the Sun United Way called the Funders Collaborative. And what they're doing is bringing together all the various funding sources, whether it's cities, foundations, federal government, state government, and they're starting to look at those issues as well so that funders are a coordinated group around these issues. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Many years ago, back in the 1990s, after reading a lot about not just youth homeless, but homelessness in general in Arizona, my partner tasked Central Arizona Shelter Services, and we were on the board.
I think resistance, the question is, do we get a lot of resistance from people as we talk about expanding homeless services or providing services to homeless people? Resistance might not be the best word. I think we have an obligation to educate, and that once we do, then people who previously didn't understand start to understand. That may be the best way to do it. But the obligation is definitely there. If just from an aesthetic perspective, this is an unattractive population, if you will. They're dirty, they're bereft of so much. Their body language, everything about them says that they're fatigued and beaten down and not exactly the kind of people you want to go up and strike up a conversation with or invite into your home. But you have to see past that, and it takes a little bit of an effort, but it doesn't take much effort. And that's up to us. So we take that obligation quite seriously to talk to anybody who will have us and say, yeah, just kind of look past this a little bit and understand we're talking about a young person who needs help. And that's really all they are, just young people who need help. Man.
Just a quick question, am I hearing correctly? Most seniors turn 18 their senior year of high school. And so the moment they turn 18, they're out on the street and don't have any financial resources.
If they're in the foster care program, then the foster care program, those individuals engaged in the foster care program, and this is not an indictment of them by any means, there's a lot of wonderful people doing that, they are compensated for their costs. And when that child turns 18, by statute, they no longer receive the compensation, and the youth no longer may stay there as part of the foster care program. Consequently, yes, a lot of kids, when they turn 18, off they go. Yeah.
Social Security at least lets them go to that 18 limit, right?
Yeah, there you go, and that's true. There are some people who will turn them out with nothing. And I say that not as an accusation; it's just supported by the facts. You know, we see this in our surveys. 35% of the youth we serve have gone directly into homelessness from the foster care system.
I think we have about 5 minutes left, so we have a comment here, and then to you, sir. So,
I actually just wanted to address the gentleman who asked about if there's anything happening with the combination of community services. We actually do have something, and it's meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock.
You might want to give her the microphone for a second. The East Valley Homeless Youth Task Force.
Yeah. It's called the East Valley Homeless Youth Task Force. And actually, Vivian, who's your housing, comes and meets with us. We have UMOM, we have Home Connect, and then we have just about every school district here in the East Valley that comes, Mesa, Higley, Tempe, of course, and Chandler. So we have all these McKinney-Vento liaisons that come. But we're always looking, actually today's meeting is about involving more community services. So we're trying to put together a directory. So we're looking for more community services to be involved with us. So if you would like, if there's any community services that are interested in joining our task force, we would love to have that on our in our pocket, basically. Huh? It's at Marcos Deniza at 4 o'clock.
Thank you for letting everybody know that. That's great to hear. Vivian's a very dynamic person. She's been referenced Vivian Mann, who's one of our directors at Tumbleweed. That's fantastic news.
and then we had a question back here. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify what you were saying about youth in foster care. I worked in child welfare here in Arizona for 32 years and retired from that system. At CPS, or Department of Child Services now, Child Safety, to keep a child in here up to the age of 21. At the age of 18, a child is given, or a youth here up to the age of 21. But it's strictly up to that youth if they want to remain in care.
That's only for IEP. That's only special ed students. It's not.
All youth that are in.
Just for the viewing audience, that was a correction of what I said earlier about the youth turning 18. This gentleman pointed out he's a career worker in the Department of Child Safety, which was CPS at that time, that there is an opportunity to stay in the system through up to age 21, presuming that the 18-year-old chooses to do that. So yes, it is more accurate to say that the 35% of our youth are kids who have chosen to leave their foster system, leave their foster care home, and then have discovered that they wind up being homeless.
Kids can remain in that program even if they're attending college and receive subsidy through the state up to the age of 21.
And a lot of our kids, the kids that are 18 and opt to leave, understand, that they have nowhere to go, but they're opting out anyway. So we still have that issue of how can we make a better system, and frankly, I don't have an answer to that question.
That information may not be being given to the students. It's at the discretion of whoever has that knowledge, because I'm telling you, they're not telling the kids that.
So this.
On that issue, I just flat out don't know.
Well, and this last question and the discussion, again, points back to the need for greater awareness of this issue and the complexities of it. If this was a nice, simple problem, we all wouldn't be here. So thank you for sharing that information with us. At this point, I think we're going to stop taking questions. And again, I thank you all for being here. It means a lot to us to know that people are interested. So thank you.
I wanted to remind everyone to please take a survey on their way out. And I also wanted to acknowledge, thank you so much to this wonderful community. We have public safety, we have members of the religious community, the faith community, we have our businesses with us, Mountain Park Health Center, We have Commissioner on Disability Concerns at HRC. Thank you so much.